Right, hello and welcome to episode 50. That's right, episode 50 of the ReptiChat podcast. I've been coming to your ears consistently every other weekend since the 18th of February 2023. Can you believe it? 18 months of me talking in your ear holes, and you guys and girls just keep coming back. Honestly, I could not be more grateful. And of course, not only do some of you like to comment, like, subscribe, and follow, and all that sort of stuff, some of you absolute legends decided to support me even more by joining the ReptiChat Patreon. Patreon, you guys are on screen now. I think, yeah. Patreon, you guys are on screen now. Thank you from the deepest depths of my heart. Your support is more appreciated than you could possibly understand. Whilst I am quickly talking about Patreon, if you did want to sign up, it starts at £1 a month. There is a 7-day free trial, I believe, on all the tiers as well. You get early access to every vlog and any pre-recorded podcasts, such as this one. Not only that, you get access to the Reptile Squad Discord, where you can chat with me and like-minded keepers. You get to know who's coming on the podcast before anybody else. I also give Patreon the opportunity to ask all the podcast guests any questions that you may have. And last but not least, there are stickers as well. So yeah, that's Patreon. The link is in the show notes below. But actually, before I do forget, this is a pre-recorded podcast, like I just said. So although there is a live chat on the YouTube premiere, we obviously won't be including any comments in our conversation today as we have pre-recorded it. Also, what do you all think of the new studio? It's not quite Studio 3.0 yet. We're like 2.8 at the moment. So we're getting there. There's a few more bits I want to do. Next up, podcast sponsor. As I'm sure you are aware, there seems to be a link between reptile keepers and people that have tattoos. I don't know where this love for ink and scales comes from, but the majority of reptile keepers have tattoos. And that's why Bobby of Rango's Tats has decided to support the pod for the next few months. I got some ink from Bobby recently, and I was very, very happy with it. The studio is very nice. Bobby is based over in Bishop's Stortford at a studio called Obsidian Ink. And I recently made the trip over there, like I said. So if you're a reptile keeper that likes tattoos or a tattoo enthusiast that likes reptiles, head over to Rango's Tats on Instagram and get chatting with Bobby. Start your message with the word ReptiChat so he knows that I sent you. Next on the agenda, as I'm sure you're aware by now, I am a Tough Mudder ambassador. If you want to have a go and you want to save yourself some money at the same time, use the code TMBA24-BENN to save yourself at least 20%. There are a few events left this year, so don't miss out. I might have a few free tickets as well. So if you are interested but can't afford it or don't want to pay the money, slip into my DMs and I'll see what I can do. And if you haven't got anyone to run with, let me know anyway, because I am always happy to meet new people. Now, like I said, today's episode is episode 50, and I've made the decision to have a bit of a break after this episode, as I've been consistent. I haven't missed a single episode. So this will be the last upload from me until episode 51, and episode 51 will grace your ears and your eyes if you're watching on YouTube on Saturday, the 7th of September. So let's get this episode and let's go out with a bang. Today's guest is 23 years old and already had his hands on more wild reptiles than most people I know. He is here today to tell us all about his travels, his herping experiences, and maybe give you a few tips for herping near home. Please, can we all welcome, if I can find the button, please welcome Aiden Beverton. Aiden.
Hello, mate.
Lovely to have you here today. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on the podcast. How are you?
No problem. Absolutely shattered from work, suffering from classic sunburn, being fishing all day over the weekend. But other than that, doing grand.
Fantastic. That's what I like to hear. And it's not the British summertime if you don't get a little bit of sunburnt.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
So, if you haven't listened to podcasts before, I like to begin the podcast with a series of this or that of blah, blah, blah. We start again. I like to begin the podcast with a series of this or that questions to get us in the mood for chatting. So if you're happy, we can crack on with the get to know section.
No problem, mate. I'm just going to adjust you real quick. I'm trying to avoid what we got in that corner there.
So, first one, cats or dogs?
And I can only pick one. I can't be annoying and say both.
No, it's one or the other.
Okay, if I could only pick one, I'll be picking dogs. With that answered,
I think I've only had one person that's ever picked cats.
There you go. Well, the thing is with dogs, I'm very particular with them. I wouldn't choose any sort of dog. I'd be quite particular with the breed. But yeah, for the most part, pick dogs over cats.
Fantastic. Next one, snakes or lizards?
No, there's no debate there. It'll be snakes. Yeah.
Definitely. Frogs or salamanders?
I'd like to take frogs up on that.
Okay. Centipedes or millipedes?
Centipedes, 1,000,000%.
See, I'm not a fan of centipedes. They scare me. They're horrible little things.
Yeah, they are pretty evil. They're pretty mental creatures, but I don't know, man. I just like the venomous stuff over the non-lethal.
Spiders or scorpions?
We'll go with some spiders. Yeah, we'll go with spiders there.
Nice. Butterflies or birds?
Butterflies or birds? I think I'll have to side with my homie Rupert and go with we'll go with butterflies here, because I don't know if the viewers are aware, but there is some sort of how can I'll word this properly for the viewers here. There's some sort of rivalry between birders and herpers, you see, so I'll have to go with the butterflies there rather than
Nice. Grasslands or woodlands?
We'll go with woodlands. It's more variable.
Yeah. Beach or mountains?
Mountains, 100%. Love it.
I'm a big mountain fan myself. Hot climate or cold climate?
Hot all the way. I cannot deal with the cold.
Nice. And finally, probably the most important question of the entire podcast: what is your favourite biscuit?
Yeah, this is the top tier question here. Biscotti, I'd say.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I don't think in the entire I haven't been doing the biscuit question for all 50 episodes, but I'm not sure we've had any overlapping biscuits. Maybe chocolate hobnobs are up there a little bit, but for most part, everyone's pretty varied. I like it. So, Aiden, before we get into your travels, you aren't just like a herper, but you're a reptile keeper as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Please, can you take us back right to the beginning? Give us a history lesson. Where did your passion for reptiles start? And then how has it sort of taken steps and has it blossomed into what it is today?
Okay, yeah. Let's bring you back until I was a little kid. Maybe, I think around the ages of 5 to 6, where my passion started to bloom for reptiles in particular. I've always loved animals, from growing up, and I've always been attracted to animals that have been wrongly segregated or, disliked because of their stereotypes. And whether that be dogs, for example, large defensive or aggressive dogs, I've always done the same for reptiles. So when I was a little kid, we had a family villa in Cyprus, in Paphos.
Okay.
So when I was growing up there, I would just go around at night with a little butterfly net or a fishing net, and I'd scoop up whatever I possibly could. So whether that was racers that were just dipping out for cover just before it got dark, or if I'd flipped them during darkness, little geckos, skinks, ocellated skinks, and then even the odd viper as well. So there's Macrovipera out there, blunt-nosed vipers, for example. So as a kid, I was always wary of, taking wild animals in to, study them and look at them. But I would quickly learn that they're decline in health. And whether that be in those olden aquarium-style enclosures, glass with mesh on top, or whether that be a simple case as like a plastic shoebox container or storage box sort of thing. And I would never long-term keep them as a kid. I'd just, I'd try and feed them crickets or hoppers or, grass that was in the garden, whatever it may be. And soon release them. Obviously, that would be promoted by my parents, and my siblings would watch me take in a snake or a lizard and then quickly realise that, he's going to keep this thing forever if we don't try and trick him that, he can get an ice cream if he chucks it back sort of thing. So that's where I started keeping. I never really got into keeping them properly when I was a teenager and growing up through school, really. The reason why was that as much as I had a strict upbringing that I couldn't bring in any animal, I've always learnt independently that it's a big commitment, you know, to take in any animal, whether that be a dog, cat, gerbil, etc. And especially reptiles, that they live for a very, very long time. So I was fairly patient until I started keeping them properly and ethically, most importantly. So I started keeping properly was during my college years when I started my animal care and animal management courses. So that's where my knowledge of ethical keeping and the animal's welfare was really, you know, really burned into the forefront of the reason why you should keep it. Not just the fact that, you know, it looks cool or there's a new latest morph out of this animal, so you're psyoped into spending the hot cash then and there.
Yeah,
I was always attracted to the natural beauty and keeping them like you would see them in the wild or see them in documentaries, etc. So in around that time where I was confident with my abilities of the animals that I cared for at college, I started taking in the odd rescues that were in and around the local area, you know, that were given to me. And I also adopted my first and full-time snake, which is just behind me here, Cleo the rainbow bar, Brazilian rainbow bar, which is a fairly decent sized girl now, just short of 7 foot.
Nice, nice.
So it's a very, very sizable Sencria, or Brazilian rainbow bar. So the thing was, when I would take in rescues, these weren't so much your typical, you know, leopard geckos, bearded dragons, royal pythons, corn snakes, etc., that most people would take in and then rehabilitate or sell. So I would be taking in local wildlife, whether that be common frogs, adders, and grass snakes. So I was fairly well known in my local area, and still to this day, of going out in West Sussex and photographing or catching these native reptiles. So when I was studying animal management, I was fairly confident of, as well within the course there was vet nursing. So you know, you started to learn just you pick up basics, and that's all that you'd really need when there's an animal suffering or in need of help. As long as you know essentially animal first aid and to treat minor illnesses, then I would easily be able to take in these natives, rehabilitate them, and then send them back into their native home. Where shall we go from here? I've kind of
no, that's perfect. So so then how long between, well, so when was the last time you were taking in animals and rehabilitating? Because obviously you've been doing lots of bits and bobs and exploring the world. So I presume that's on the back burner at the moment.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. So I don't have the time, you know, to really be taking in X, Y, and Z all of the time. It's more so, I'd say the last time that I had an animal in my care was an adder, and that was last year, right at the start of the year. I think, just before I went off for my second time in Thailand. This was last year, 2023, right at the start.
Yeah.
And I took in an adder and I took in a grass snake. The grass snake had a missing eye and still needed to be treated to heal up properly.
Right.
And, you know, in most instances, or if not probably all instances, these animals heal by themselves. They're very, very they're very sufficient animals, right? So they don't need human intervention.
Yeah.
The fact is, I'm seeing these individuals time and time again. So these are individuals that I'm going out and observing during my herping sessions. And, you know, within the limited range I go to in my local area, I'm learning about these individuals, and I can ID them. So instead of this being one of many that could have been potentially injured, I've already observed this animal many times, and then you've kind of built up some kind of rapport or bond to this individual, and then seeing it injured, you know, it tugs on my heartstrings. So I'm going to take it in for a short while.
It's much like how people have when they have like foxes in their gardens, and they grow to love the foxes, and the fox gets mange. You'd treat the fox, but obviously your preference, or maybe not preference, but is the scaled variety.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, I'd just feed them a couple times, 2 or 3 times with a meal, if they were happy to, first of all, take the meal and in need of a meal, because many instances, like for the adder, for example, I didn't have to feed whatsoever. It was very stocky. I knew it would be just fine with a few weeks of no meals. So all I was wanting to do during this time with the adder was make sure this had a different injury. So the grass snake had the missing eye that was still fresh, and I believe that was, you know, due to a bird. The adder had some sort of fungal going on, whether you'd call it scale rot, snake fungal disease, etc. I don't think adders have been proved to have snake fungal disease, but at least it had some kind of fungal thing going on. So I just treated it with some ointment that I have actually got up here. Some F10 ointment.
Yep.
So I'm sure most reptile keepers are aware of this.
Yeah, I think most of us use F10 in some variety. Well, yeah, that's mad. But like you say, if you've got the knowledge, why would you not help? And,
well, exactly.
To be able to have the opportunity to do that is something that I think a lot of people, not necessarily just with reptiles, but a lot of people, if they see a sick animal, they want to be able to help it, but they just don't know how. So if you know how to, then why wouldn't you?
Exactly.
We will come back round to your UK herping. I want to just chat quickly about your Brazilian rainbow boa, because like I said, you are a reptile keeper as well as a herper. So how long have you had your rainbow boa for?
So I've had Cleo, I believe, for 5 or 6 years now, give or take. It's in that ballpark, yeah.
Fantastic. And was there any particular reason that you chose a rainbow boa over the other many snakes there are that you could have possibly chosen?
Yeah, there was a particular reason, yeah. So during this time that I adopted Cleo, I was volunteering at RSPCA in Brighton.
Yep.
And during that time, my knowledge on the more cryptic and rare sort of species was very, very limited. And I'm not saying rainbow boas are, you know, in that category of rare and cryptic. They're fairly mediocre to be, you know, common reptiles. But it's not so much your everyday mass of the market, royal pythons, corn snakes, leopard geckos, etc.
Yeah, I think they are a little bit more specialist.
Yeah, slightly so, but I don't want to hype them up too much. You know, I'm very much aware of, since travelling, of the plethora of animals out there. So I took her in because I was spending a lot of time around one particular royal python, and don't get me wrong, I'm glad that I took in Cleo, but I was you know, fairly close with this juvie royal python, and after weeks and weeks of, you know, taking care of it near enough every other day, doing your daily health checks, etc., and then coming in one day and finding that it's got sold to some teenager, I was a little bit disgruntled and, you know, upset that this animal that I was looking forward to getting, I've already built a 4x2x2 bioactive for it. It's already gone by now. But, you know, a hand was put on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, Aiden, we've got something special around the corner for you." And that was Cleo. So she was found abandoned in a property, I believe somewhere in West Sussex. And it could have been months, you know, that she was crawling around this flat until I knew the new property owners moved in and then just found this 6 foot, at the time she was around 5 or 6 foot, rainbow bird just crawling around the living room.
Bit of a shock.
just a little one. It's not like you expect to see any animal crawling around the house, let alone a 5 or 6 foot boa. So that's how she made her way to RSPCA, and then that's how I took her in. I heard that she was an absolute arse. She bit everyone that ever touched her, and that had me sold. I love my defensive animals. I love an animal.
I like an animal that bites as well.
Yeah, exactly. Shows that it's got energy, and especially with rescues, you want to see some kind of energy.
Yeah, I find that with dogs as well. Like if there's a dog that is unhappy, doesn't like people, I'm like, I want it to love me.
Yeah. Yeah, very well said. So, I took Cleo in, and it was a slow progression of where I am today. So I started with a 4x2x2. As much as it was live planted, bioactive to some sort, I wouldn't say it was truly bioactive. Now with my deeper knowledge, I really know that you must have a complex plethora of invertebrates and plants as well to all truly make it, with your lighting system, to actually make it bioactive and conform to the standards of bioactive. Chucking in a few bugs isn't going to do the job.
Yeah, I think most people get confused with the terms bioactive and naturalistic, and I think most people like soil, live plants, some isopods and some springtails. It's a naturalistic enclosure. Don't get me wrong, it's great, but it's not a bioactive enclosure.
It's not doing anything.
No, there's so many different, like even when it comes to soil, there's so many different levels of soil and layers and that are needed for a true bioactive. But yeah, don't get me wrong, like naturalistic is better than sterile tubs, so crack on if you're doing
by a landslide. 100%. Yeah, so I'm not having anything against naturalistic keeping. I think it's great, and I think it should be promoted for those that are simplistic keepers. I think they should progress themselves.
Yeah.
But so getting back to my progression, it started with 4x2, and I made my way up the chain of swapping from any old live plant that I would get my hands on. So whether that be Gon, Pothos, I had a few other common stuff in there, sphagnum moss, etc., etc. All of the starter sort of plants and naturalistic enrichment.
Yeah.
And I worked my way up to essentially trying to create an isotope. So only then using a Brazilian or South American endemic species of plants.
Cool.
Which I have behind me here. I have a list on my phone, which are all the Latin names, but I'm not going to cause a brain bleed for myself to try and think of them off the top of my head.
But I'm sure there are some real plant nerds listening. If they want to know, I'm sure they can slide into your DMs.
Well, exactly. Yeah. If anyone's really that interested, feel free to ask me. Head over to my Instagram, Aiden Beverton, just my full name, and send me a message there if you wanted to know any information. But it's all Brazilian, Peruvian, and South American in general species behind.
Wow, that's cool.
Bromeliads, Calathea, etc., etc. But that's where I've moved up to. So she's now in a 5 foot long, 4 foot tall, 2 feet deep.
Nice.
And I'd love to go bigger. Just with limited space, and with her being my full time girl, with hand in hand with going traveling, is fairly limited. I could probably give her another foot in length before she touches the other side of my wall, and you can see it's basically half my bedroom's her. So she's certainly comfortable in there.
Nice, fantastic, cool. That's nice, and it gives people some food for thought for their enclosures as well. Maybe I know a lot of people are trying to recreate the more wild side of where the animals come from. So taking like you say the isotope and selectively choosing plants from that specific area as well, instead of just whatever your local garden centre's got, is like the next step. I think that's cool. That's not something I'd really thought of, but I like that. That's a brilliant idea. Now let's move on to the main topic of today, which is herping. So for those of you that don't know, I've been doing a YouTube series in which I am trying to find all of the UK native reptiles and amphibians, and it's going pretty well with only the sand lizard, natterjack toads, and pool frogs left to find. However, Aiden here is a master herper, not just in the UK, but abroad too. So we'll start abroad and then we'll finish up on home soil, Aiden. So where have you been herping abroad?
Okay, so I'd like to just state, although there are very kind words from you, Ben, I wouldn't class myself as anything professional or as a master. I'd still say I am somewhat of an amateur, and I've still got so much to learn and do. But to answer your question, where I've been, so during my younger years growing up and revisiting our family villa in Cyprus, I spent a fair amount of time there, so herping around, been to a few other European countries just the top of my head, herping as a little kid. I wouldn't class these as herping trips. These are family holidays, as a little kid. But I'd be bored senseless doing the typical tourist thing of walking around and sightseeing. So I'd wander off, find a woodland, a grassland, a section of agriculture, a beach, wherever way we're going, I'd weir off. And if I couldn't go fishing, then I'd go and see if I can find myself some lizards and snakes.
Nice.
So places like Spain, Bulgaria, Slovakia. I've been there a few times with my best mates. They're Slovakian. So I've got some great herping experiences and memories out there. Nice. A few other European locations, but it's not that important to name every single one. It's fairly similar environment, and the more interesting sort of places that I've been in within Southeast Asia, from top to bottom in Thailand, basically bordering Myanmar. A stone throw from Myanmar, or a couple of seconds of swimming through the river, and then you skipped over the border, and then likewise right down south. On the border of Malaysia, or essentially one night, for example, where we were walking through the mountains, geographically we've already entered Malaysia, but because we've not passed through any certified border, I didn't technically enter Malaysia, but so from top to bottom in Thailand, been to a few islands within the Philippines, although there are countless islands to explore. So much more to see, and that's my main amount of that's the main two places that I've been within Southeast Asia, Philippines and Thailand. But saying that the environments expand an incredible amount and they vary so much. So even though I can just name those two countries, the plethora of species that I've found is like going to separate worlds. There's so much to see out there. And with Thailand, I don't know if it is the most densely populated for reptiles within Southeast Asia, if not one of. So, there's over 200 species of snakes just described within Thailand itself.
Nice.
And countless more to be described or to be found.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, is there? I presume because of the dense population, but is that the particular reason that you chose Thailand and the Philippines, sort of, to go herping on your trips? Because obviously, there's other places like you could do Myanmar, Malaysia. You could go the other way and go like South America.
Yeah.
So, what was the particular reason for choosing that sort of those destinations?
So, the reason why I chose Asia to go with was back in 2022, where I'm sure most of us can relate to this current day in the UK, if not years before going on a nice holiday, just working full time and getting bored of the same cycle day in, day out, and not, doing anything and enjoying much in the terms of exploring the world. So I've always been attracted to South America. Having a South American native myself, I've always leaned towards the South American sort of animals and documentaries, etc.
Yeah.
Until I started researching the different organizations that will tour you out there, and the wildlife organizations that operate around the globe. And cost-wise, it made the most sense to go with Southeast Asia and explore around there. So roughly they were half the price of South American tour guides
Wow.
and sort familiar experiences. So I got to know some really good friends of mine now that operate within Southeast Asia. So I'll just plug them. Explore Herpetology, based in Thailand and then Malaysia as well.
Fantastic.
So
if you send me a link
fine.
at the end, I'll put it in the show notes below as well, so
Yeah.
people can find it.
So that'll be the reason why I went with Asia. I got in contact with Explore Herpetology and booked a tour essentially after I saw a few posts on social media over, I'd say, over a year period of looking at the posts on Facebook and getting more and more attracted to living that experience myself. Going out there, I bonded really well with the guys that operate Explore Herpetology, and I'd now say they're really, really close friends of mine. You know, we talk on a day-to-day basis and plan trips from year to year round since then. So that was back in 2022.
Nice.
Obviously, 2 years from then, that's all my trips in between have been with those guys. Only of my two trips out there have been with Explore Herpetology itself. The rest of them have been little private trips between a group of mates around Southeast Asia. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then, so I've got a whole bunch of questions, but they might not like link into each other perfectly, but we'll just go with it, and I'm sure we can make sense of it. So to start off, you're in the UK. Obviously, you've seen your Explore Herpetology. How do you plan for a herping trip to the other side of the world? Because I know even when I'm doing like the series here, I can't find snakes on about like within 100 miles of my house, let alone flying to the other side of the world and then going to find them. So what are you sort of doing to plan, or is it all through the tour company?
So you could go out there with absolutely zero experience, no knowledge on how to herp, and the guys from Explore Herpetology, and I'm sure other companies as well, but I'm just going to speak on my own experience.
Yeah,
are professionals. They've done this for a significant period of time, and for example, one of the lads that work for Explore Herpetology, or the creator of Explore Herpetology, Rupert. So he grew up in Thailand, and he's got over a decade of experience herping and working with reptiles of the native range of Southeast Asia, right? So anyone going out there can essentially just open their mind to all of the free information that these guys will be giving you and helping you along the way. Whether that be navigating through the jungle, how to ID non-venomous to venomous, mimics of one another, and then also it's just day-to-day life, all of the downtime that you have within a new country. If you've never been to Thailand before, you may not know where to go and get yourself a reliable, safe dinner, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So my experience with herping prior to going to Asia was all around Europe, and if the viewers are aware of if they've herped themselves in the UK or throughout Europe, most European species are really cryptic, and they stick to borderlines of agriculture or woodlands. It's not like, for example, you'll be walking through dense woodlands or European jungles and then stumble across countless species. It's not going to work like that. You're not in an exotic, warm, humid climate where these animals are getting all they need from the dense protection of jungles or woodlands. In Europe, they're always on borders, just cryptically exposing themselves to get themselves the much needed energy from the sun and prey source found around those areas. So my knowledge wasn't very great on how to herp. I knew the basics of how, IDing common species, and I had my skills of handling countless snakes throughout captivity and herping throughout Europe. So it's not like I was going in all guns blazing, just picking up Malayan crates, thinking it's a corn snake, putting it over my shoulder, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But like I say, you don't need to be a genius, and you don't need to have buckets full of information. You can go out there and really rely on your guides because they know exactly what they're doing.
Fantastic. So, when you, if you're like, we'll carry on using your experience in the company that you used. When you, but do they cover everything, or is it literally so you've still got to organise your flights, you've got to organise your accommodation, and you just go and meet them each day, or is it like a full itinerary, a bit like say you fly here, we'll pick you up from the airport, and we have you for 2 weeks? What's the deal there?
Yeah. So in regards to Explore Herpetology,
Yep.
the only thing that the customer is going to be purchasing is the flights out to the location. So the guides will, depending on the tour itself, can either pick you up from the airport if you arrive late, for example. I remember one of the guests did. If not, you're just responsible the first day, getting yourself there, settling into a local area or the same organised hotel that everyone's discussed that they're staying in. And from there forwards, the guides will pay for your breakfast, lunch and dinner. Obviously, snacks and alcohol and expendables is up to the customers themselves. The guides aren't going to be paying for everything, but they'll pay for main meals at breakfast, lunch and dinner. And they'll pay for accommodation. This is all, put together as your total cost of the experience. But yeah, like I say, the customer themselves has to purchase the larger down payment of the ticket. Everything else is pennies, really, especially being in Asia.
Yeah, fantastic. So we'll stick with Thailand for this whole conversation, I think, because there's no point in chopping between different places. So how have you been to more than once to Thailand, did you say? Just to make sure.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, I've been to Thailand a handful of times. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go for the first time you went to Thailand with Explore Herpetology. We'll use that as our base for the whole conversation. So how long was your first trip over there?
So these trips are roughly 2 weeks. Okay. So that was my first and second time to going to Thailand were the exact same, time length-wise, just a couple of weeks. So there, in fact, the tour itself is just short of 2 weeks, but depending on your availability, obviously you can have a couple of days here and there to spare afterwards to make up time. Many people within the tours would spend months out there, but being in full-time work during the time and in relationship, I couldn't spend months out there. I'm still paying rent over in this country, and I've still got to afford things back in this country. So the first couple of times going there were around a 2-week period, in and out. But they were cram-packed every single day. If you've never done herping in general, you'd soon realise that going out and finding animals, in particular reptiles, isn't sort of activity where you're putting your feet up and allowing the animals to come to you. You're going to them and you're really, really grafting, hiking every night during the day in some instances, and excuse the French, but you're sweating your tits off really in a climate that you're unfamiliar with, in a country that with a language that you don't speak. So it's completely new, and it's a big kick to the system, but it's certainly worth it and highly enjoyable.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. So when you went over the first time, did you go with a list of species in mind, or was it a case of I'm just going to go and whatever we find, we find?
Yeah, so the first time going there, I really wanted to tick off the common stuff that I've already worked with and in captivity. And when I mean common stuff, I'm talking specifically about what you'd find in the wild, not common in captivity. More so mediocre to cryptic stuff in captivity, because they're more expensive. The Southeast Asian sort of stuff in captivity is more expensive than your North American or your Indian or African species. They're far more cheaper. So I went out with a few handfuls of targets, but also things that were, I've never come across in captivity at that current time. Things like beautiful pit vipers or Trimeresurus venistus, Phuket pit vipers, Trimeresurus phuketensis, things of that sort of manner, Waggler's pit vipers. So I would have never at that current time in 2022 worked with them in captivity. As UK listeners know, that you need to have a DWA license, and being 18 years old, 17 years old, around that sort of range, I wouldn't have been able to get my hands on those sort of things.
Yeah.
But going to Thailand for the first time, specifically in Phuket and Krabi, where certain areas that we'd be going to is well known for these animals. You know, I was over the moon, so I had those in mind, yes. And from there onwards, I would obviously get myself things that I would have never have heard of, didn't even know their existence until it was quite literally placed in my hand.
Yeah.
Or talked about, whether it be a venomous, for example, talked about briefly, so you can get an understanding of its behaviour, its ecology, and those that are brave enough and willing and sensible could obviously then get their hands on experience with an animal that they would never get the chance of interacting with other than behind a glass screen at a zoo.
Yeah, and we are talking venomous animals as well as non-venomous animals as well.
100%.
To me, is mad. Like I've never had any. I don't think I've ever had any hands-on experience with any venomous animal, apart from maybe a couple of scorpions that maybe are a bit hotter than other scorpions. But like even adders in the UK. Like if I was to see an adder, the last thing I would do is pick it up. So to be in a country where you're unfamiliar with the species, obviously the guides are there and they're the experienced ones, and you're trusting their judgment. But like I would be, like you say, excuse my French, shitting myself, walking through the jungle, going, "Oh, what was that? Is it going to bite? Oh, is that going to kill me? Is that going to kill me?" But I suppose that's one of the things that, it is part of the excitement of it.
Oh, 100%. You know, every day we take risks, and every day, near enough, all of us see the next day. You know, so going into the jungle with respect and fear is one thing, but having excessive fear and demonizing snakes that for the whole time in captivity, you know, you've adored them, and you're saying that they won't bite, you know, for no reason. They're only biting to defend themselves and if they're in pain, etc. But then when you're in the field and you're walking through the jungles and you're, you know, crashing through foliage, and you're thinking, oh, that, you know, there could be a pit viper on the other side of that.
Yeah.
And like me disturbing the leaf in front of it, it's going to make it tag me. But it's not the case. You know, near enough every session that I've gone out to Asia, and I've always bulldozed through the jungle. So there's been countless times of quite literally grabbing plants, ripping it, and then, you know, just before you let it go, you look down and then you'd see some kind of cryptic species curled up on a leaf inches away from your finger. Whether that's harmless or venomous, it makes no difference, in the sense that it's done exactly what your pretense have always thought about them, that it's not going to unwillingly, you know, attack you. It's just going to defend itself if it's threatened. And for the most part, they never have.
That's mad. Like, and I presume it was. In fact, tell us, describe like a day to night, like a 24-hour period of your herping. You pick your favorite day, because obviously you would have been finding animals. I presume you were handling lots of stuff. So yeah, you wake up. What's the day? Tell us about that.
Okay, so the specifics will be different day to day, depending on location, target species, how you feel, because, you know, you could drop in health one day and just want to have a breather. I personally never have, even after being, you know, riddled with cold, potential food poisoning, extreme localized pain. I'll get into some specifics of some injuries that I've attained throughout my trips later down the line. But your days would start around 9-10 a.m. Wake up. So it's not a super early start, but sunrise is at around 5 a.m. in Asia, year round. So if you can ignore the sun and get a nice bit of rest from the previous night, you'd wake up around 9-10 a.m., set out for a meal shortly after, getting yourself ready with the group. You'd have your first meal of the day, whether that be a breakfast, lunch, or brunch sort of thing. And you'd want to have some kind of hearty meal, because of the amount of energy that you'll be utilizing throughout your trip. You don't want to just have a little snack like some toast and butter or a little bowl of cereal. You're having egg fried rice or special fried rice for a breakfast, which for a Westerner is a foreign concept because you're having dinners for breakfast.
Yeah.
But yeah, you truly need those energy and those calories in you. So once you've had your first meal, depending on the location and temperature of the year, you can then go out during the day and do a couple of hours with the guides exploring localized areas, whether that be limestone casts and caves, short outcrops of jungles, etc. But for the most part, it's way too hot, especially for people that don't have a massive amount of experience in the field. They don't want to be walking around in 35 plus degrees Celsius, sweating their tits off, looking for snakes that are also, and lizards that are also hiding away from the sun because it's too hot, you know. So for the most part, you do have a rest time during the day. So going through your camera, editing photos on your computer, catching up with emails, whatever it may be. And before you know it, it's now early evening and you're in much need of dinner before you set off for the night. So those that are unaware of it, instead of herping during the day like you do in Europe, in Asia you're going to be herping at night because for the most part, most species are nocturnal to crepuscular. And even those that are diurnal, so active during the day, you'd find sleeping at night. So those diurnal species that are going to be out racing you and you've got a very slim chance of catching them. One species to name would be the radiated rat snake. You know, it's a fairly common species, but incredibly fast, and you essentially only see them crossing roads and darting in front of you when you're on a gravel path or something. But it's been countless times during the night where you're finding them sleeping in a small section of shrub, or just as it gets dark, you know, you'd see one slowly crossing the road because it doesn't have its vital energy like it did have during the day. So it's taking its time, and you know, it's slipping and sliding all over the road, and that's where you get your opportunity to get hands on. So your evening would start around 7 p.m. in regards to herping, and this is when the sun just starts to go down. By about 8:45, 9 o'clock, the sun's completely gone, and it's now pitch black. And when I mean pitch black, those that haven't experienced it, it's quite a surreal experience because, at least in the UK, even where we live, for example, in a small village, where light pollution isn't anything really to be talked about. When you're in the deep jungles of anywhere in Asia, there is absolutely zero light pollution. You know, the only light that you're going to be getting is off the stars and potentially the moon if it's out. But other than that, you're in pitch black. So 7 to 8 o'clock, you've got that cruising time where you'll be driving around with the guides just as it gets dark, and this will promote any diurnal species to go to bed, but also it's also going to promote the nocturnal species to come out and start hunting. So you'll be cruising through this time because you'll be exploring the most amount of land during this time. You know, you'll cover more ground in a car than you do on foot. And then once it's completely dark and you truly entered night, you'll drive up to some chosen location that the guides have got a vast amount of experience herping within and finding the target species, and you'll set off with guides and split up. So, you know, one guide could take a large group of people that wanted to do a slightly easier footpath or a slow incline walk, and then another guide could take the serious sort of members on a really sharp incline or potentially hazardous sort of herping where you're steep up against a cliff face with a big drop or something like that.
Right, and then what sort of time are you herping until?
So that's a good question. So I'd like to see what you think. What time would you think that we'd wrap up? So bearing in mind we start at around 7 p.m. let's say when you start herping. When do you think that I would wrap up?
Well, I don't know, to be honest. I haven't got a clue. My brain is saying 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why it's saying 2 o'clock in the morning, but I feel like it's going to be the early hours of the morning. Yeah,
you're very much right. You're very much right there. So anywhere within 1 to 3 a.m. you'll typically pack up. 1 to 2 a.m. is more sort of the average.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll be earlier than that if you've had a really productive night before. We're all grafters out on the experience. I can speak for the vast general of us that if you're having a really tough night, you'll just push on harder and harder until you get that success, whether it be, a really rare cryptic species that's only been seen a handful of times, or something that just looks incredibly beautiful and you've never seen before. So you'll take that as a win and you'll go to bed anywhere between 1 and 3 a.m.
Nice. And then you do it all again the following day.
That's it. Yeah. Wake up the next day and get straight back to it. Yeah, like I say, around 10, 11 a.m. is when you get out and have your shared meal with your group. And
it sounds incredible. And then are the groups the same sort of size each time you go? Like the times you've been, is it the same sort of size group? And if so, what sort of size are we talking?
Yeah, so they've been very similar. Anywhere 8 and 11 people, I believe.
Okay, so it's like a minibus of people.
Yeah, it's usually 2 vehicles.
Yeah.
So 2 5-seat cars or 4x4s or trucks, whatever you may refer them as.
Fantastic.
We'll take out separate groups, yeah.
In regards to like equipment, people obviously using snake hooks and stuff. Are you taking your own, or are they supplying them?
So the guides do supply hooks. They are obviously their own hooks themselves, so it's their property.
Yeah.
As you can see, I'll go the opposite way. There you go. I've got 2 hooks over there, and I've also got a hook in front of me that just sits on my desk, which is my little adder hook. It's perfect for little vipers. So I've always brought hooks out. In reality, they aren't crucial. You have got a pair of hands in front of you, and whilst you use hooks to separate yourself from a bitey, defensive, or even venomous snake, for the most part, once you realise that vipers will stay still on foliage, you can use sticks for vipers. The only really reason why you would need a hook is for an elapid, for a cobra or crate, something like that. It's more twitchy, or it'll fly back at you and have a bit more with play. But myself, I don't know if the viewers or I'm fairly comfortable free handling, and it's not something that I'm going to force down people's throats that they must free handle, and if they don't, they're not grown up. I'm just saying in the sense that once you build an understanding between a species, or even then more specifically an individual, you don't need a hook. And simply tailing them, keeping their front third of their body on the ground or wrapped around something is more than enough, and it's safely handled in that manner. But
I won't touch any more on free handling because I don't know anything about it really. I don't want to point people in the right direction, but it's fantastic that you're able to do that. We'll go back to the species that you've seen instead of the specifics of the trip. So, what were some highlight species of your first trip? So things that you wanted to see and you did see, and then maybe some things that you weren't expecting to see that you did see.
Yeah. So in my first trip, I'm thinking to myself, all of the big name Thailand natives. So things like king cobras, monocle cobras. I'm a big lover of cobras. At that current time, working in captivity, I wasn't really that attracted to cobras, mainly because I knew their reputation of being animals that just piss and shat near it every single day and made a lot of racket, so it was just too much stress for or hassle for a keeper's side of things. But once I was out in the field, it completely flipped on itself. So I had a target mind of king cobras, Sumatran cobras. We'll think of things of the viper family. So Phuket pit vipers, beautiful pit vipers, Hagen's pit vipers, etc., etc. And there were a few times where we struck gold. Essentially, on the first tour, the biggest highlight I would say was the red-headed crate, and that was my first experience handling a cryptic elapid. So by that time already, I've already handled during this tour. I've already handled a couple Malayan crates, Bungarus candidus, which is the most common elapid that you'll face out there, and it's not uncommon to find one near enough every single night, depending on locations.
Right.
You know, they're very, very common species, because
And
they are
just a
basically...
quick one. Are you at a different location every night as well? Yeah.
So you spend, 1 to 3 days between each location.
Right.
So you
Okay.
do bounce around and see a vast amount of areas.
Nice. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to.
No worries.
Yeah. So yeah, you've seen the Elapids, and what other things? What other?
So there's
did you stumble across?
even unrelated to your reptiles. There were a plethora of cool looking invertebrates, birds, small mammals, etc. So I'm trying to think of a few things like flying squirrels,
Yeah. Cool.
massive tarantulas that you'd see out there. You'd see wild cats, like small spotted cats, and not myself, but you could go to a Kangaroo National Park and get really lucky with a melanistic leopard. There's
Wow.
so much to see out there.
It's
Unrelated.
not. It's not just reptiles. There are just
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
whole heap of animals.
Yeah, most definitely. And places like I've been during my second instance being to Thailand, elephants and tigers were big name animals and are the larger animals that you could encounter in these areas. So yeah, there's so many to think of just the top of my head of what I've encountered, what I'd like to have seen, and what I would have personally have liked to have avoided.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Going off those, then what is something that you wish you had seen that you haven't seen? We'll start there. We'll start there. What's something you wish you'd seen that you haven't seen?
So what I wish okay. Yes. I'm just going to think of the binomial because it's skipping my mind. It's quite embarrassing because they're like one of my favourite species, but I'm just having a brain fart. Okay, yeah. So false cobras, Sunazididon. I don't really care for the specific species like Sunazididon macrops or others that are just skipping my mind. But yeah, the genera of Sunazididon false cobras are species that I've personally never found. I've been in their range a couple of times, but I've unfortunately missed them. So I've taken all of the wildlife notes that I possibly could, temperature gradients, UV gradients, humidity gradients, photographs of the natural environment where they've been found. I've talked to poachers and locals that have encountered them, but unfortunately I've not been able to find them myself out there. But it'll only be a couple of months until I'm back out there, and I'll hopefully get my hands stuck into them.
Fantastic. And like I said, my questions are all over the place because my brain there's so much going on, and it's
Welcome
incredible.
to the club. My answers will be all over the place.
It's
too.
fine. I'm sure most of the listeners and watchers are thinking the same sort of thing. Is it the same time of year that you go out each time, or does it vary? And does it matter?
It's all different. Yeah, it's all different. And the person I'm speaking from personal experience. All the times that I've been out there, it's been different. I've never stuck to a specific time of the year. Although, in regards to the tours that I've attended, they are set times of the year, because they lean towards specific targets that guests always want to see, which are more likely to be encountered at those certain times of the year, whether that be environmentally related due to weather. So it could be dry season or wet season, or it could be a breeding season for that target species. So so I've always gone out different times of the year.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And then jumping back to where we were before, you mentioned there was species that you hadn't seen that you did want to see, and there's also things you were avoiding. So what species do you not want to stumble across?
Right. So we'll get into that. So those weren't anything reptile related. No matter the severity of injury likely to be caused by a reptile, I'll always want to get my hands onto it. But unrelated to reptiles, there were things that I really didn't want to bump into. So during my second time in Thailand, I was in in the south of Thailand in Batong. And this specific area, just a week before we arrived, some local villagers have been trampled to death by these elephants. Within the same range, you'd also find tigers, and I believe leopards could have also been found there. But I'm certain that tigers were found in that exact park as well.
Wow!
So there were a couple of instances, walking solo through the jungle, and just thinking to myself, this is a perfect place to be ambushed by a tiger.
Yeah.
I'm in a wide clearing with thick foliage that I can't see 2 feet through, on either side of me. So this is just a perfect spot to be ambushed. And that's always at the back of your head. But then you bump into some kind of reptile that you're passionate about. And then all of those thoughts of getting attacked or getting mauled by a tiger skips your mind, because, you've now got a cat gecko in your hand, or, something like this.
Yeah. That's mad, though. And like, you could accidentally stumble across some elephants, then all of a sudden they've trampled you because you've spooked them.
Yeah, I mean, all of my instances bumping into elephants have been really shortly lived, where you lock eyes with an elephant, or let's bring you back. So in the instances where I bumped into these elephants, you hear them before you see them. I mean, that may be an obvious answer. They're very large animals, and throughout jungles, they're clumsy too. Right. These aren't predators that are slowly creeping through, making sure to not make any noise. These are bulldozing through the jungles, picking up trees and throwing them if they're in the way. And that's no exaggeration. These things really do bulldoze through the jungle. So you do hear them. You just hear log fall and a lot of stomping. So you do have to pause and try and differentiate if that is deadfall of logs, because the jungles are so humid. Not all of the trees are actually in great health, and they're rotting away slowly over time. So throughout near enough every night, you'll hear deadfall of trees just collapsing on themselves and falling down. And obviously, if you hear creaking next to you, run, because you don't want that 2-ton tree landing on top of your head or whatever it may be that's going to cause some damage. But the times that I bumped into the elephants, I thought were deadfall. And although I was in a national park where elephants have been spotted and they're not unheard of or anything rare there, I had not seen them until that point. I've only seen, piles of dung, so some elephant poo mounded up. And the elephant poo that I'd stumble across here and there was fairly fresh. So you'd think to yourself, well, these elephants have only been here a short amount of time ago. But up until that point, I've never seen one face to face until I thought I was encountering deadfall. So I was pausing, watching and hearing out for these logs and trees falling in front of me, maybe about 50 meters in front. And then the deadfall started turning into like a stomping sort of noise. So I could hear the trees collapse, but also once they've collapsed and landed on the soil, I could hear those same trees being crushed. Yeah. And that's when I realized to myself, well, trees don't have any explosives in them. They're not just going to start, imploding. That's an elephant just destroying a section of jungle. And after a few seconds of, scanning and shining my head torch, eventually my head torch locked eyes with those refractive giant orbs that the elephants love to use. And so once I got those refractions back and I could see these giant pairs of eyes that weren't a couple of feet off the ground that you'd see quite commonly from small cat species or dogs or people. This is well off the ground, and this animal was clearly outsizing me by a considerable margin. So the first instance that you should do, and what I did, was turn off my head torch. These animals are filled with testosterone, especially the bulls. And when they see someone shining a head torch in their eyes, they're not going to take it too kindly to it, and they'll charge you. So the first instance I did was just turn off my head torch, spin in a 180 and run for my life. Tripping and falling over logs in front of me, falling into a stream, etc. But, I did have to get away. I wasn't chased up until the point it could have gored me or could have damaged. But it was within 50 to 100 meters of me, and that's close enough.
Yeah, definitely.
I would
And to
say,
be fair, you wouldn't want to hang around to fight, like to give them the opportunity anyway.
yeah,
But
exactly. By the time I actually locked eyes, I would say it was closer to, more so like 20 to 50 meters. But approaching the deadfall, or what I thought was deadfall, was around 50 to 100 meters. So I was just slowly creeping in until it was almost too late to get away. But fortunately, I did the right thing. Turned my head torch off, did a 180, and got out of there.
That's mad. That's what an experience, and all the time stumbling across amazing reptiles as well.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I mean the whole walk up to the area that the elephants were congregating in, some white-bellied rat snakes, Thais fusca, were incredibly prevalent throughout that jungle. Waggler's pit vipers were incredibly prevalent. A couple of other things that were really rare but were found 2 times were red-headed crates, blue coral snakes, Calliophis bivigata, and just countless others. I could literally spend like the next 30 minutes naming every species that we'd find in that jungle. But yeah, it's really busy of just getting your hands on with finding all sorts.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely amazing. It's something that I would it's definitely up there on my list of wants to do in the future. Obviously, the future's big, so I've got plenty of time left.
Oh, exactly.
A few more questions on this, and then we'll move on to herping in the UK.
Yes.
I know you and we mentioned it briefly a few days ago when we were talking on Instagram. And I know I can't remember the exact topic of conversation we were having, but I know you mentioned cost. So for people that are interested, what is the sort of costing of a trip like this? Obviously, it does vary from flights, like flights change in price and everything, but if you could ballpark it.
Yeah, if I could ballpark a total cost, I would say anywhere within the 2 to 3 grand sterling silver, so pounds.
And that's all in, including your flights over there, anything you might extra need.
Yeah, that would be all in. That's all inclusive. Obviously, that's taken into consideration that you've done your research on flights, you've chose the right time of the year, and you've gone with a decent airline where you save yourself some money. So, for those that are unaware, flights can range within £500, which is a great price. That's an absolute steal, which has been half of the amount of flights have been that cost. But then a few of my flights out there have been 3 times the price, and they've been just short of £1,500. So ballpark price of the whole tour will be roughly around 2.5 to 3K will be the medium, the average.
Fantastic. So it's definitely affordable. Like, it's not easily affordable for everyone, but you could save up if you wanted to do it, and a few years of saving, if you needed to, it's achievable.
And as much as that figure may scare some and say, I don't have that money to spend all at once because it's a short period of time, you'll spend on 2 weeks. That's understandable, with the living crisis that we've got in here, so in the UK. So not everyone has that amount of money that they can just willingly splash. You can do it independently. As much as I'm always going to highly recommend Explore Herpetology. You can always do just a much more relaxed sort of trip on your own accord, on your own instance of choosing the amount of time that you can spend out there. So rather than just doing the 2 weeks jam-packed every single day, you're out there during night and day. If you go on your own accord, it's up to you where you want to go, how much time you'll spend in the field. You get a bit more freedom, and obviously then it'll be much more friendly on the cost, and it'll probably be half the price. But saying that, obviously you won't get half the experience like you would going through a reputable guide like Explore Herpetology and getting your hands on animals that you've only seen in documentaries every night, because there's only so much that a beginner's going to be able to pick up through scanning online, going on iNaturalist, whatever it may have you, compared to guides that have got decades worth of experience.
And they do it day in, day out, don't they?
Exactly. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, fantastic. And then the last, where are we at? Last question, last couple of questions, on this topic. Obviously, you mentioned you are going back out there soon. So, have you got? Obviously, you have got near future plans. Have you got future plans as well? If so, when are you off to, and where are you off to?
Right. So, my next trip with the group of guys that I've been to Thailand and been to the Philippines with will be next year, and it will be in a country that I've never been before. It will be within China.
Okay.
So that's if all things going forward still conform and go to plan, we'll finalise that. But before then, that's a fair amount of wait. I believe it's around May, or I believe a May-ish time next year. And I'm too impatient. I want to have another trip out, but I'll be going somewhere more closer to home, on a friendlier budget.
Yeah.
I just want to have a weekend away to a week away, with some friends that I've got back in the UK. Whether that be going back to Slovakia or going somewhere, Spain or Greece, etc. That's great for herping, but also just to put my feet up, stuff my face full of food and booze, and just live like an old tourist.
Yeah, to be fair, I've been talking with a few friends recently about doing like a long weekend to Greece, Spain, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
To go herping, and there's a lot out there. It's like I've been looking on iNaturalist a lot recently. I'm like, I could just go there. There's
Exactly.
all sorts of stuff everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah, compared to our limited landscape in the UK, where you've quite literally got two things to pick from that you'll commonly see, and then everything else is either an invasive. We're talking in snakes here.
Yeah.
Reptiles in general, but in snakes, regardless of snakes, you've got two species, the adder and grouse snakes that you commonly see, and then everything else is either going to be invasive or far harder to come across.
Yeah, definitely. Saying that, I'm 1 for 1 on smooth snakes and adders this year. I've seen one of each. So
Your luck and Paul's luck has been through the roof of smooth snakes.
To be fair, it was all Paul's luck. It was all Paul's luck.
Yeah, you just got on his victory bus there and stole his snake.
Yeah, pretty much. To be fair, I was invited. I didn't go and steal it. He invited me. But I know he found another one a couple of days ago as well, I think.
Yeah, just a couple. Yeah. He's shown me some photos.
I can't remember if he put it anywhere, so I don't. That might be a spoiler. I'm really sorry if I've just given that away. I can't remember, but it is what it is. And then finally, in regards to herping abroad, before we come back to the UK, if you could give the listeners a top 3 must-visit places for herping abroad, what would your top 3 be? Doesn't matter if you've visited them or somewhere that you want to visit, but top 3 in the world, where would you go?
Oh, in the world. See, I feel like that's such a hard question to answer, as I've really not been to as many places that I'd like to have been. But I'll see if I can pick them. So, I know I'm going to get judged harshly from my herping friends here.
That's fine. They don't have to be in any particular order either. So it's not like a number 1, number 2, and number 3. It's just
3 random places. So for those that are based around the keeping side of things, going to America was something that I absolutely adored. I feel like I failed to mention this earlier in the podcast. It just skipped my mind talking all about Asia. I've been to North America. So, so from the keeping side of things, all of your common sort of captives are found in North America.
Yeah.
Whether that be the harmless, non-venomous, and your common venomous stuff that are in the captive side of things are mostly found within North America. Yeah. So that's definitely a location that keepers should really go to and check out. You could get a decent price on flights, and it's familiar sort of settings with being in the UK, being in a country that's English tongue, and also familiar foods and etc. But in terms of the rest of the world, where it really comes down to the true grit of herping, where you can find countless species up to in the doubles every single night sort of thing, I'll have to rank Thailand as number one. Yeah, without any kind of doubt. And although that's very generally speaking, Thailand's a massive country, and I've been top to bottom. I have always favoured the cooler sort of montane environments. So in the north of Thailand is where I really want to target again, and I advise other herpers and people that are attracted to reptiles in general to go out and get their hands in, because there's so much to be discovered there, and there's some really cryptic cool species out there. And then lastly, number 3. Where would I go? Well, this isn't a country, it's a continent, but broadly speaking, we'll go with Africa. Okay. So anywhere South Africa or West Africa, I'd love to go. I've not personally been anywhere within Africa. My family has, but I would love to go.
Yeah, definitely. My parents they did a safari. I can't remember if they did 3 weeks or a month in South Africa at the beginning of the year, and I know that they said it was absolutely incredible. And then a few episodes ago, I had Cookie on from Wildlife with Cookie, and he had just come back from a trip to Africa as well. And again, he said absolutely amazing. So yeah, there you go. You've pretty much covered most of the map there, in some way or another. We've got America, Africa, and then over to Thailand as well. So take your pick, people, if you want to go.
There you go.
Fantastic. Right, and then obviously I may have mentioned it just once or twice, but we have been herping around the UK, and you seem to have it down to a bit of a fine art. I know you've been observing a few adders locally, from neos all the way up to like adults as they are now. But so just tell us a bit about your UK herping. Where did you sort of start like handling stuff? And obviously I know you said you did it as a child, but sort of more seriously as an adult, because you're very into your herping.
Yeah. So I've always gone out and looked for our reptiles as a little kid in the UK, but it wasn't until my college years where I would reliably find them, and I started to build a knowledge base around going out and targeting them. So during my first couple of years, I started to build my knowledge on prime times of the day where they'd come out and bask, the sort of environment that these snakes would favour, and I'd pick up individuals and get to know the phenotypes of localized populations, what they look like, how large they get, how to ID a male and a female, how to sex them, etc. So most of my time spent during the first couple of years, I would say I still to this day use the same sort of techniques and rely on the same information. So when you're targeting grass snakes, for example, they're an atracine that likes to primarily feed off amphibians, and a small portion of their diet will be small rodents. But for the most part, they're going to be eating things like newts, frogs, fish, etc. Yeah. So the first couple of years, I would always target a location that's got a pond, a stream, river, whatever you have it, a water source nearby. But not only nearby, in hand with the water source, you've also got agriculture. So like being in a location where we live, where we've got agriculture that surrounds us and rivers that aren't too far away, I would rock up to a stream quite literally adjacent a wheat field, or a section of agriculture, and just on the border of agriculture you've got your typical UK foliage. So you've got your bracken, you've got your thorn, you've got blackberry bushes, you've got gorse, those sort of prickly thick plants that are utilised throughout the whole animal kingdom of prey species, but also predators that will hide within this prickly hard foliage to protect themselves or ambush prey. So agriculture provides a large amount of space that's fairly open. So you're never going to find snakes in a wheat field just in the open, because they're then exposing themselves to bird of prey or foxes or another predator that will take them out. So they'll stick to the borders in the thicker sort of foliage that will protect them. And maybe the viewers or listeners that are attending this podcast will know, if they've ever walked in the countryside, they could have stumbled across some matting that has been placed down, or a bit of tin, or even just rubbish that they've come across, and it's slightly out the way on a border next to some scrubby sort of stuff, and that's where you'll find your snakes, especially grass snakes. So I'll always reliably find them within borders of agriculture and in the bracken. For adders, they're a bit more specific with their environment. Unlike grass snakes that are very adaptable, you can find them from woodland to agriculture to grasslands, butterfly fields, etc. Adders are dependent on their foliage and their flora that grows around them. So they rely on gorse, lowland heath, heather sort of environments, and once it's taken away, they'll die off. It's not like an area is stripped for grass snakes, for example. They would move off and find somewhere else. Adders are really locked in and keyed into these locations, hence why they're endangered or critically endangered, and they're dropping every single year in numbers, because they really depend on that sort of environment. So you'll find them in the same sort of locations in that environment, in the sense of they'll stick to perimeters. Obviously, they're not going to want to sit in the broad open and expose themselves totally. But adders, being venomous, know that, and they are a little bit more bold than your grass snakes. So grass snakes will very rarely expose themselves entirely unless they've got some good cover overhead of them or slightly adjacent to them. Adders will sit slightly further away from your gorse, blackberry bushes and heath. But they'll always stick close to it. If a predator comes their way or are startled by something, then they'll scuttle back over. And then going on to your smooth snakes, they are also a lowland heath, bracken sort of loving species. They really rely on that drier, prickly sort of environment. As much as I would say, out of all of them, the adder is the most arid, and days that it's very humid, I've had poor success with finding adders. And adders and smooth snakes are found a lot of the time in the exact same environment. It's just rare to be in an environment that houses both, because of the limited amount of space in the UK that's still here.
Definitely, there's not a lot of habitat left for them, unfortunately.
No, exactly that. And you'd also find sand lizards in the exact same environment as your smooth snakes and adders. The thing is with sand lizards being the rarest lizard, at least, maybe the rarest. Okay, no, I'll correct myself. I wouldn't say they're the rarest, although they've been branded the rarest by a few people. In general, lizards are active, right? And so you're far more likely to see an animal that's covering a large amount of space. You'll just see one whiz past or boldly sit on some heather or some heath in front of you, and that's where you can spend that time admiring it. But something like a smooth snake or an adder, it clocks eyes with you, and you've got nanoseconds to seconds before that snake's dashing off. So that's your opportunity to snap your photo and solidify your observation. But they will share a symbiotic sort of environment where they're working together, and that's mainly because of they eat this similar sort of prey, and they eat one another. I'm sure there was a study out there around all of our native reptiles, and sand lizards were actually found to have the most other reptiles within their diet, I believe.
Right.
I think it was under forced regurgitation. But a large male sand lizard, he can be a nice little bully, and he will shred a juvie or neonate adder to pieces. Likewise with a fellow common lizard or grass snake if it's small enough. Obviously, grass snakes being the largest native snake in the UK. A 4-foot grass snake is more than big enough to outsize any sand lizard that wants to thrash him around. So it's not like letting it up in the belly, but they're quite an interesting little lizard that we have in the UK, and as you can see here, I highly respect them as I've got one tattooed stuck onto my forearm.
Fantastic. And talking briefly about adders and briefly about tattoos. Now, I know that I said at the beginning of this section that you have been observing locally adders specifically from neonates, and then there's a few individual animals that you've been keeping an eye on for a long time now, one of which you have got tattooed on you as well.
That's right.
So for the viewers that are viewing, not listening, obviously, you can just about make it out there on the camera.
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly hard because I'm going back to front here. So I move my arm to left,
front,
you go
upside
right.
down.
There is an upside down adder there. But
there you go. Yeah. So how do you know that it's the same snake you're looking at each time you go and visit?
So I can guarantee it's the same individual that I'm seeing based on a few things. So when I photograph adders, for example, or individuals that I've not seen before, I take, variable photos, macro of its head, so I can get a scale count. I'll take photos of injuries, comparison photos with size, so whether that be in hand or next to my arm. I can get all of these different records of the specifics of that individual. Then the next time I go out and find a snake that looks similar, I can cross compare those photos that I've already previously taken with similarities with that individual. But also, these individuals that I'm finding time and time after again are found in the exact same spot,
Right. Yeah.
So quite literally to the T of where I found it last time. And these will be through seasons, during the start or the period of the year where adders will first come out of brumation. I will find males in the exact same spot day after day or herping session after herping session. So whether that's me taking an in-situ photo from a distance, or I've gone up to them, safely handled one, moved it to a side so I can take some artificially lit photos and then gently released it back. The next day I come out, it's in that exact spot. So it's not been kicked off from fear. It's now not going to starve itself because it's undergone life-changing amount of stress, which is a load of rubbish that old head herpers would love to throw around with UK natives. You'll find it in the exact same spot time after time. Obviously, then there's no need to handle every instance that I see it, because I'm not benefiting after a few times of handling it, and I'll just leave it to enjoy its day in the sun, and I can record from a distance, But that's how I will then ID individuals from individuals. And the one that I've got tattooed on me, the earliest I found it all the way back in 2022 when it was an adult, but it was about half the size as it is now. And since then, it's had countless births. Many generations have been born into the lowland fern and heath that it resides in. But also, I've been lucky enough to observe that individual with mating with other adders that I've seen many times. So back in 2022, this female wild type caramel sort of colour that she's got, bred with very similar sort of or drab looking males. So they are males that are green to brownish, very atypical in the sense that most males that you'd see are that contrast look of silver and black, or grey and black, white and black. So, and that's their male breeding colours. So she was breeding with very ugly looking males and grey brownish looking ones, but they still had the black dorsal stripes, zigzag stripes. So you could tell they were clearly males and they weren't just communally basking with one another. and then she started breeding with another male, whether that be that prior partner being killed off from a farmer or bird of prey or a predator of some sorts. But since 2023 till this current day, so for 2 years, she's been breeding with a ginormous melanistic male, and he is the most plastic adder that I've ever interacted with. I've found him just as many times as I found her. So bearing in mind, I found her the first time all the way back in 2022, him in 2023. It's over. It's got to be in the 30s or 40s times, the amount of sessions that I've gone out and seen those. And going back to that male, he's absolutely gorgeous. Not only is he a melanistic adder who's, I don't know, maybe 1.5 foot, really, really good size.
Yeah.
But he's also as calm as a corn snake. I've had an observation where I've creeped up to him basking. He's spotted me, turned back on himself, and just slithered right up to me, up my shoe. And then I'm still standing at this point, so he's not going to be able to, climb my leg or anything.
Yeah.
But he's up my shoe, just sniffing around, tongue flicking like crazy, no sign of stress. He doesn't cock his head back ready to strike, and then off he moves off again. So, those are the instances where I've just safely picked him up, handled him. And there's obviously then countless times where I've observed him breeding with that female, where I've left him undisturbed. I've seen him combating with other males, leave them undisturbed, and then him by himself, just on the crawl, probably looking for a feed, and just a simple under the belly, lift him up, and he couldn't care about me, tongue flicking like crazy, just like a captive, and then just happy to be there, and off he goes. A couple of minutes after I take some photos.
That's honestly, it's so cool. I love that. I need to come out herping with you when we get some time where our schedules aren't as busy, because I'm just really busy at the moment.
I can tell you now, once our schedules align, I'll go out with you to the spot that we both know of, and we can see if I get ourselves hands on with this male melanistic adder. I've only found him during the summer months, so although adders, males in particular, will come out the earliest during the winter months and spring months to either the hibernation or brumation. This one male in particular, I've never observed him during winter. I've never ever observed him during mild sort of months. I've only ever found him on blistering hot days. And it's quite a unique situation, because you'd think an animal that's dark in colour would want to really stay away from the sun, because they can overheat. They can absorb the heat and the energy that they need from the sun far quicker than your drab or your tan or lighter coloured individuals. I've only found him on days that are like 25 degrees plus Celsius, and that's his preference, whatever it may be. But yeah, no,
definitely. I know Paul's frothing at the bit as well, so we'll definitely have to find some sort of time. All right, a few more questions, and then we will start to wrap up as well, because we're going for an hour and a half, which is nice as a last bumper episode, as it's episode 50. A lot of people I know from my comments on the series that I've been doing, the keepers I've spoken to, want to start with herping in the UK, but they don't know where to start. And obviously, there's not that much information. Like, there are a few bits and bobs, but if you're in like the reptile keepers circle, and you say to your reptile keeper friend that keeps, I don't know, corn snakes, I want to go and find snakes, they go, yeah, me too. Where do we find the snakes? So what are some tips that you could give people that have no experience herping in the UK, but they want to go out herping?
Okay, so you may have no knowledge on it, or they've been given hardly any to no tips on going out herping. So the first couple of bits of resources that I would highly recommend is if you're getting out, if you're interested with reptiles, you should first be getting out on your own accord, going for walks and seeing if you could find them with no knowledge. And if you don't have any luck with that, which isn't unheard of, and I wouldn't be completely shocked that you've not seen a cryptic animal that has evolved to hide from large apes walking around. Talk to locals. Someone's gonna have seen an adder. Someone's gonna have seen a grass snake, whatever it may be. In their garden, in their local woodland, etc.
Yeah.
So, other than talking to locals and using social media, using Facebook, for example, you've also got iNaturalist. And iNaturalist will show you these pin records. And if they're obscure, it'll be within a few hundred meters of where it'll be found. But for the most part, people will put the exact same location of where they found that snake or lizard. And so iNaturalist is a very useful bit of resource that you can use to find any species of reptile in the UK. And going back to all of the environments that I've just previously talked about. So I won't obviously then rant on for the next 30 minutes over it again. But if you can remember back to the environments, lowland heath, agriculture, and lowland fern sort of environments, that covers all bases, and sand dunes, and they cover all bases for our natives.
Yeah.
Go on YouTube as well. Check out some videos of other people's success, because they'll be vlogging or just recording their day outs, and you can just pick up the information throughout that video of where they are, where they're looking, sort of thing, etc., etc.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think iNaturalist is one of the resources that I probably use the most at the moment as well. And although there can be like some very obscure records, or the records are from like a long time ago, for the most part, it's a pretty good resource to get started, if nothing else. And then once you have used it a few times and you start to recognize the environments, you can sort of adapt and use your own experience. And
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if I can talk about my experience of finding smooth snakes
Yeah, of course.
in the UK, up until my first instance of finding them, I hadn't had any luck with finding them. I've only found them in Slovakia at that current point, but I knew they had been found somewhat locally in the South Downs National Park, which isn't that far away from us.
Yeah.
So I went onto iNaturalist, searched the species name, and went on the most ideal sort of pin. There were, I think, 2 pins in the whole of the national park. It could be more since then, or they could have been taken down. I've not even looked since last year when I found them. But I found this one pin, and then I went on Google Maps and found the same area, so I could scan what sort of environment, where I can park a car up, go with a friend, etc., etc. So that sort of day, I walked all around this pin, and I was looking out for things that could come in handy, like artificial cover, tin, mats, boards, and then natural cover, rocks, logs, etc. And I hadn't had any luck finding smooth snakes. That day I was striking out with finding them. I did find many sand lizards, both male and female. So that was a lovely sight. But I've also seen many European lizards, all in Mediterranean Cyprus. So it wasn't so much of an incredible experience seeing a little green lizard running around when I've seen them and relatives of those many times before.
Yeah.
And I was really targeting these smooth snakes, and I thought I wasn't that far away from the pin. So the closer I got to the location, I realized I was basically on top of it. And instead of then looking out for ideal habitat, I'm just going to see if I can find where this, because there's a photo as well on iNaturalist of this snake in hand. If I can find something in the background of it that would ring a bell. And there was this really aged old oak tree, and bearing in mind I'm in lowland heath, so it's low cover with open skies. There's no large trees around. So then when I did see a large oak tree, it stuck out like a sore thumb, and I headed in that direction. I found a bit of artificial cover around the tree, some bits of tin. Unfortunately, there were nothing under the tin. But as I was walking away, just in the corner of my eye, I saw a rub really useful box, one of those plastic tubs that a lot of reptile keepers know and love.
Yep.
And that was the first instance that I thought was, hold on, why is a tub here? Because my relation to these tubs is keeping animals in them, and others doing the same. So I went up to the tub and saw some logs sitting on top of it, and I just thought, oh, it's a wood storage tub. Someone's out here that's got some really fine cuts of oak for some apparent reason, and they're storing it under this tree. Very odd. But, I cleared off the logs that were on top of the tub, lifted it up, and to my surprise, there were 2 smooth snakes and a grass snake in the tub, submerged. There was about 4 inches of not freezing, but very, very cold water, as it had been raining for, I think, just over a week straight every single day up until that point. And the water was only about 3 or 4 degrees Celsius. I'm sure I took a reading of it. So these snakes were all coiled around each other, just floating on top of a few inches of water that had made its way through the air holes that the poacher so graciously supplied for these poor snakes, with some sand. So it could have been some young kids that have made a little, like, a wild setup, but in my eyes, because of how odd it was and so close, almost literally a dead on, or a stone's throw distance from the iNaturalist pin, I believe they were being poached from the national park. So after taking some photos and records of them that I knew that would be useful for people that actually do study them legitimately, I took some ventral recordings, some headshots with a macro lens on my camera, and then made sure they were free of injury, realised that they were a breeding pair, and released them in the exact same spot. The grass snake I didn't have to take any photos of. I've got hundreds of photos of grass snakes, so he just went. I took a video of him, and he went straight away without needing any camera work. If you'd want to check out that, I do have that whole day, that whole observation published on my Facebook. It's just my name, Aiden Beverton, and if you scroll down on my feed far enough, which shouldn't be that far back, you'll find the day that I've recorded my success out in the national parks. You'll get to see it there.
Fantastic. Right, and then the last question before we do the wrap-up questions, do you have any final advice that you'd like to share with people to get out herping, be it here or abroad?
Okay, my best tip is really just to do it. Just bite the bullet and get out and do it. Yes, there's certain things that will hold us back, but a lot of it is ourselves telling ourselves, no, I'll do it next year. I'll do it when I've got a little bit more time or money. And then during that time where you're distracting yourself, the passion will start to burn down, and you'll slowly lose motivation and get out doing it, because other things come around, life problems come in front of you, etc., etc. So just act on those impulses. And as much as it's something that has always been put on the back burner as keepers, not to be impulsive and not to make split-second decisions, to really research things. Once you've done your research and you know what you want, just get out and do it, because the more time you wait is the less time that you're going to be doing it. And that's what I can say for sure.
Fantastic. Right, well, we've got 2 more questions, which are the wrap-up questions. This one is the official wrap-up question, and then there's one more little question after.
Okay.
So, the final official podcast question I ask all the guests is a double barrel question, and I know you are more of a herper than a keeper, but you are a keeper too. So if time, money, space, and legality were no issue, it's a double barrel question. Which animal, mammal, non-reptile would you like to keep? And also, which reptile would you like to keep?
Okay, so we'll go with reptile first, whilst I'm answering this, I can then think of something other than a reptile. I can definitely say there'll be bird of prey that I would love to keep. So that's it's not a reptile, but getting back onto what I would love to keep. If I was in the UK permanently, which I'm not going to be, unfortunately, I would love to travel some more and live permanently abroad. But if I was to be in the UK for the rest of my life, I would have an outdoor setup, a sort of communal setup, but the number one main attraction to that would be an Asclepian rat snake.
Cool. Very cool species.
Good old Zamenis. And so you can find them in London, but being said that, if they can survive in the wild here, they're going to do great in an aviary sort of setup, you know, in your garden with natural European ivy growing up the aviary, you know, live plants. You've got large logs in there to allow them to bask and climb and just see them display or exhibit naturalistic behaviours. And personally, I would house them with many other species as well. And next to it, I'd have a little greenhouse with European green tree frogs. You know, I'd have some sand lizards running around, all in different environments, obviously, because they need separate sort of habitats. But you know, I would love to keep a European species in the garden rather than artificially lit, because you're, as much as you can do as much as you want to with incredible brands like Arcadia and etc., you can't beat Mother Nature, and just sticking them outside, they benefit far better.
Cool. I like that. That's a fantastic answer. I like that.
Wow.
And then, what non-reptile, it doesn't have to be a mammal, I know I said mammal, but non-reptile would you like to keep?
Okay, so non-reptile, I'd love to answer some kind of cool mammal, you know, but I've also got a love for bird of prey raptors. Yeah. And during my years where I'd volunteer in different organisations, I volunteered at Tilgate Park, Animal Park there, a few years back, and I got to work and raise a Eurasian eagle owl.
Wow.
So my experience with bird of prey is really limited, but the time that I spent with this Eurasian eagle owl was time I'd always adore and look back on. And if I could ever be able to get myself a bird of prey, you know, just off the experience that I had with that juvenile, I'd have loved to get my own tongue twister there.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. It's getting late. Yeah, fantastic. I think I can't remember off the top of my head. Are you the first person to say a bird? I think possibly.
I hope not. That's quite embarrassing being Herp, and I've gone to a bird as well.
No, that doesn't matter. No, it's quite fine because you tried the reptile first, and then
that's
why we go reptile and non-reptile. That's cool. I love a bird. If I had the space and time and all that sort of jazz, I'd love a little owl.
Yeah.
Something probably. Yeah. I'd love birds. But
talking about little owls, something like a little burrowing owl. You know, they're communal. Yeah. Something that's got loads of personality, that's got no chance of harming you or putting up much fuss. Yeah. But they make loads of little cute chirping noises. They're communal, so the more you have of them, even better. And they're fairly arid as well, so they like their sort of sand burrows, and they're very clean, being in sand. You know, sand baths help clean them off, so it's not like something that's going to be covering itself in piss and shit every single day. But yeah, that bird of prey are absolutely awesome.
Yeah, awesome. All right, and then finally, I know you have mentioned it a couple of times, but where can people find you if they want to know more, mate?
Okay, yeah. So my socials are as follows: as my full name, Aiden Beverton. I don't have any kind of funny tag. Just AIDEN Beverton. Everton will be at the front, but also I'll be showing this in the podcast here. You'll see my name.
Yeah. And of course, I'll put the links to your Instagram in the show notes below, so people can go and check out some of the amazing photographs that you have taken on your herping trips, and there are some absolutely amazing photos on there.
Why, thank you. I'd definitely say my Facebook will show near enough all the photos or acceptable photos that I've taken. My Instagram's a lot more niche. You know, I've only published under 50 posts on there, and probably about 20 to 30 of them I'd say are decent photos. On Facebook, you've got in situ videos, you've got photos, you've got everything related to the jungle, you've got environmental recordings, things like that I've taken. So if you want to see the vast amount of things that I've recorded and observed, check out my Facebook.
There you go. I'll chuck both the links in the show notes below then. Right, well, there we have it. Aiden, I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I think this has been a fantastic way to do episode 50, just in time for me to have a little bit of a break. Thank you very much for coming on. I am going to say goodbye and send you back to the green room waiting area, but please do not go anywhere because we'll have a little bit of a debrief after the episode. But Aiden, thank you very much for coming on. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
See you soon.
Thank you. Well, folks, there we have it. Honestly, one of the coolest episodes. I know I say this a lot, but one of the coolest episodes we've done for a while. Hopefully, you guys have been inspired. I know I have, and I'm going to go and speak to my wife and see if I can go to Thailand for a few weeks while she stays at home and looks after all the animals. I imagine that'll go down like a lead balloon, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, episode 50 is now done. Like I said, I will be back in September. So it's only a few weeks. I think it's 3.5 weeks, but I just need a little bit of break, sort the studio out properly because obviously it's not quite finished yet. Get some guests booked, and then we will be back in September for I guess season 2, but I'm not calling it season 2. It'll just be episode 51. So if you want to keep up to date with me and the podcast, head over to your preferred social media and search ReptiChat. I'm sure I'll pop up there. And don't forget, there is a link to the Patreon in the show notes below. That is all from me today. Thanks again for all your continued support. I've been Ben McIntyre. This has been the ReptiChat podcast, and I will see you on the 7th of September. Until then, bye-bye.